Welcome everyone to Red Planet Live. I am your host, Ashton Zeth. As always, I am elated to be hosting the Mars Society's podcast and leading the conversation about human exploration of the universe and the future settlement of Mars. As a longtime space enthusiast, I am passionate about STEM education and making humanity an interplanetary species. So thank you everyone for joining today and supporting Red Planet Live. As you'll hear me say, the best is yet to come. Today's episode is special. It's a triple feature. We have three special guests, specifically three female members of the MDRS 269 crew, each of which work for the Aerospace Corporation. And this episode with these guests feels so fitting because it is Women's History Month. So I'm just so excited to be speaking with all of you. Dr. Kristine Ferrone, Ali Taylor, Ashley Kowalski, thank you so much for joining today. I'm really looking forward to today's conversation. Excellent. Well, we're going to kickstart. I want to do quick introductions for each of you and just highlight the amazing projects and experience that you have. So first one, Dr. Kristine Ferrone, thank you so much. Dr. Kristine is a lead technologist for human spaceflight, the Systems Technology Group for the Aerospace Corporation, and served as crew commander for MDRS 269. Kristine has studied the effects of space radiation and supports a variety of programs as a radiation physicist, including a joint Air Force and NASA project developing space nuclear power technologies. That's a tongue twister. She also served as flight controller for NASA's International Space Station. Welcome, Kristine. Thank you for being here. And next we have Ashley Kowalski, who is a project leader in the International Partnerships Department for the Aerospace Corporation and served as crew engineer on MDRS 269. Ashley provides technical support to the U.S. Space Force Space Systems Command International Affairs Office, helping develop a coalition space enterprise through international partnerships with U.S. allies. She recently served as flight engineer for Sirius 21, an 8-month international ground-based space simulation to study the effects of isolation and confinement on human psychology, behavioral health, and crew dynamics. Ashley, I'm happy that your jury duty was postponed and you're able to speak with us today.
Same.
And lastly, we have Allison Taylor, who is a senior project leader in the Human Exploration and Spaceflight Division with the Aerospace Corporation and was the crew executive officer for MDRS 269. Ali supports NASA's Artemis missions through NASA's EVA and Human Surface Mobility Program and Lunar Terrain Vehicle Project, developing processes, operational concepts, and requirements for future lunar surface assets. And she volunteers for a roller derby team. Ali, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, everyone. I'm just, again, so elated to be speaking with each of you. So we'll dive right into today's conversation. On Red Planet Live, I do a segment called Question of the Day. I promise it's not complicated. No right or wrong answers. It's not meant to stop you. Just want to hear your opinion. So today's question is a would you rather. And with this crew, I know you're accustomed to being in confined spaces. So this one should be easy. Today's question is, would you rather be locked inside an amusement park or a library for one night? I'll give you a second to think. I see the wheels turning. Yeah. All right.
Is the amusement park open?
That's my question. Can I ride or no?
Just you there. Yep. You can ride all the rides, eat all the food. It's just you there. You're locked in for one night.
Gotta go amusement park.
Same.
Yeah, I was gonna go for that too, especially if it's just one night.
And no lines.
Exactly. I would pick the same. Amusement park for sure. No ride lines. You can ride the same ride as many as you want. All you can eat popcorn. I for sure would be amusement park as well. And for those that are listening, you can vote in the chat as well. I'd love to see what you guys think. Would you rather be in an amusement park or a library for one night? I see a few responses already. Definitely amusement park. Yep, agree with you there. Well, with that, let's dive right in. I have been talking with all my friends, my family, and about this specific episode because I was so excited to speak with each of you. And I wanted to allocate as much time of our conversation to question and answer. I'm really curious to hear your perspectives on both your crew mission, your work with the Aerospace Corporation, and some of your insights as being a woman in the space industry. So my first question started off, I would just love to hear how each of you got involved in space. Was this something that you'd always wanted to do? Maybe an interest and a passion you discovered later in life? You knew right away, nope, this is what I meant to do, and that's the path I'm going down. So, Kristine, can you kick it off for us?
Since I was knee-high to a grasshopper, I wanted to be involved in space. So, there's stories that go around my family about me trying to learn the phases of the moon when I was still in diapers. So, and I've wanted to work in space since I was a baby. So it's been since day one for me.
Yeah. And what did you do in terms of your education? So you knew you wanted to do this since day one. That led you to college and to different educational programs. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, definitely. I was lucky to go to a high school that had a lot of specialized advanced courses in STEM. So took a lot of AP courses in science and math in high school. And then my undergrad, I did physics, astrophysics at Carnegie Mellon University. Which was local to me. I grew up in that area. So that was a nice progression for me to get into the space segment, and then moved on from there. So I've continued to keep going to school, but that's a conversation for another time.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Ashley, what about you?
For me, I think I'm a little bit opposite to Kristine, actually, because I definitely was not one of those kids that was a super space nerd from the start. I think my love for space, or the development of my love for space, started probably closer to end of high school, beginning of college time frame. So I did always like math and science, and so I always leaned towards those subjects more often. And once I was picking majors for university, I was actually pretty torn. I knew I liked math and science, so I was like, okay, engineering seems to be the right fit. And if I was going to have to narrow down which engineering type I want to do, then I knew it would definitely be space. I was already starting to kind of, be interested in all the shuttle launches and just, what NASA, because I grew up in Maryland, so NASA Goddard was huge for us. So I followed a lot of what they were doing. But I still had this thing in the back of my mind that I really wanted to be international oriented as well. And so I was like, well, maybe international affairs is the way that I should go. So I don't think it was as clear cut for me in the beginning, even when I started college. And but when I began university and I did start with the engineering route, I decided, no, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to continue with. And freshman year of college, I ended up getting an internship at the Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C., because that's where I went to university. And I think from there, it just kind of was a snowball effect that kept growing and growing from that point on. And so, I was a little bit of a later bloomer in life for the space industry.
Yeah, I hear you on that. Me too. So Ellie, what about you? What was your background? How'd you get started?
So I grew up in New Hampshire, and I guess there's a few astronauts from New Hampshire, one of them being Krista McAuliffe, and they ended up in the 90s naming a planetarium after her, and we did field trips to there, and I just remember being influenced by her whole, first teacher in space, and just kind of growing up with that and being really keenly interested. And then just as we went on field trips and things throughout the years, we did a trip to Washington, D.C. in 8th grade, and I just was in heaven in the Air and Space Museum. And then my mom sent me to space camp for my 16th birthday, and that kind of really sealed the deal for me. It's like the best thing I could have ever done. But I also struggled with, choosing a direction. I am really good at art, and I had some people that were like, you should really just go to art school. And so I had to make a decision, and then I went to college and I picked space science at Florida Tech. And it was pretty challenging. I worked my butt off for my bachelor's degree, and I had considered at one point, like, is this really still a good fit? And I went to tour the Art Institute down in Florida, but ended up deciding to stick with it. So since then, it was just, I did a lot of things to, there wasn't a lot of mentorship, I guess, in college with like the professors that we had. And I realized that I did a lot of work myself to get my first internship, and I had to really, reach out to people and try and make this path happen. And I've had a lot of great experiences. So,
Yeah. Well, it's nice to see everybody's got, some commonalities. Sounds like the Air and Space Museum is like, critical for a child's development to put you on this path. I had the chance to go to the Air and Space Museum as a kid as well. And yeah, that's such fond memories. So as an ambassador for the Mars Society, I get the chance to speak with K through 12 students and try to talk about, the Mars Society, why it's important to send humans to Mars at some point, but also just the space program as a whole and, inspiring that next generation of, scientists, engineers, professionals that want to be involved in the space industry. So any advice? What would you guys say that I should tell them about getting involved and focusing on their education?
I think anybody can do it.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I would say focus on remaining well-rounded and being a creator, because a lot of the skills that we need aren't just the math and science technical skills you learn in the classroom. We need to know how to solve problems creatively, and we need to know how to work with others. So I'd say keep being well-rounded, do those other activities like the art, the theater, like Ashley does, and that really makes you better at what we do. So don't be super laser focused on only the STEM stuff. Actually try to bring in other things too.
Yeah, for sure. Pursue those other passions. Ashley?
Yeah, and I would just kind of say don't shy away from opportunities, because I know sometimes there are, let's say, an application that you might be interested in to apply to, and a job position or an internship, and maybe you don't check off all the boxes immediately, or maybe it scares you because you don't have the experience right now. But I would just say, like, a key thing here is just don't shy away from those things, because you never know what the person on the other side is looking for. And so you may very well fit the mold for exactly what they need, even if you don't check off all the boxes. And so, so just also don't shy away from opportunities just because you just don't count yourself out for those opportunities.
Yeah, 100%. I'm pretty sure I read a LinkedIn article not too long ago about this, that women, if they don't meet 100% of the requirements, they don't end up applying for the job. But perhaps, their male counterparts, if they meet 60% of it, they say, yep, I'm applying. So like you said, if you don't meet all the qualifications, that's okay. Maybe there's a component there. Be coachable, be teachable. You can be taught, you can learn. Once you get into that role, you don't have to be 100% check all those boxes to put your name in the hat for those opportunities when they come about. So great advice.
Can I just add, like, a lot of engineering is about processes and just being a logical thinker, and it's not all of it is about that very deep technical expertise, but a lot of it is the breadth of just knowing how to talk to people. So
yeah, 100%. No, I agree with you completely on that point. Well, obviously, you all being members of the MDRS 269 crew, I'm really curious to hear mostly about your time on this mission. My first question is, what type of research and field studies was your crew involved with during your 2-week analog mission at the MDRS in Utah? Kristine, you want to kick that off for us?
Yeah, I can start. Each of us here have some special things we worked on, so I'll just talk a little bit about what I worked on. So as you mentioned in my intro, I'm into radiation physics. That's my day job. So one of the things that I did on the mission was to bring a radiation dosimeter to measure the environmental background radiation in the area surrounding MDRS facility and do some geotagged measurements and create a map. So it's pretty boring to look at that map on Earth because our background radiation is pretty low and pretty consistent, but something like that might be useful to a crew on Mars to figure out where some shaded areas are, where some particularly exposed areas are radiation-wise. So that was a project that I worked on. I also worked with our crew member, Matt Eby, who maybe he's online, on releasing a weather balloon. And so he put together all the hardware and everything based on some things he had left over from a real life work experiment. We were able to go through the process of how do we fill the balloon? How do we release the balloon? How do we track the balloon in the Mars analog environment? And that was a very cool experience. That was one of my favorite days of the mission, I think. Hand it over to someone else.
Yeah, Ashley, we're going around the circle here. Ashley?
Yeah, sure thing. So the experiment that I was in charge of running was a mirror coating experiment. And so basically, these highly reflective mirrors are used in a lot of space applications, but when you expose them to extreme environmental conditions, then that degrades the performance of the mirrors. You can get corrosion, increased scatter, things like that. And so what we were trying to do in this MDRS environment by putting it in the extreme Utah conditions or our simulated Martian conditions was to, one, see if first and foremost the procedural conditions were able to be met. Did we have any issues in implementing the experiment? And if, in order to understand like how we can mitigate that risk in the future, but then also to understand, the how the mirror surface degradation occurs in an extreme environment versus an accelerated laboratory environment. And also just comparing and contrasting how we can perform a testing process like that in an extreme environment versus lab environment. So, we would put those samples out into the field and then take them in every few days and examine the samples under a microscope, take images, and then send those images back to our investigators on Earth.
Yeah. And Allie?
My focus as the executive officer one of them was on the EVA planning. So I had put together a EVA plan just so we could keep track of our objectives throughout the mission. And we were expecting, that we would have some challenges and we would need to shift things around. So I focused on, planning that out and being adaptive to being able to accomplish our goals. I think it went pretty well. And then also I had some EVA tools that I had developed an idea for based on some past projects at Aerospace where we were looking at regolith and things that, eventually you could do in situ, like build things on other planets. So kind of left over from that, we wanted to take some samples. Kristine and I had been out the previous summer to Arizona with a class to test out some tools in the field. And so we wanted to build on that prior work. So I ended up using some COTS, commercial off-the-shelf components ordered from Amazon to simulate kind of like an Apollo style scoop and a sifter and then a special collection bag for our samples. And we did about 10 samples in a couple different collection sites throughout the mission. So those are my two areas. But we also had some special projects that we added in, such as a group art project. So I wanted to mention that. Ended up being kind of a good motivator and kind of just way to get everybody together and crew camaraderie. So
Yeah, that's one of my questions is, what'd you guys do in your downtime? So it sounds like you guys had a crew project you were working on. What were some of the things that you guys had to do in your free time when you weren't working on your research and your field projects? You weren't writing your reports at the end of the day. What were you doing in some of your free time?
Well, we had some pretty raucous games of like 1989 Pictionary. Matt brought a Pictionary game he got for like 50 cents at a thrift shop, and it was an old game, and we had some pretty good games of Pictionary. We did a couple of other board games that we brought, and we watched a couple of movies, but honestly, there's not a lot of downtime there, like a real mission. By the time you cook dinner, clean up from dinner, do your exercise, get your reports all submitted and everything for the next day, there's not a lot of time. So we did have some good, stress relief, and we did enjoy some really great meals too. So I'd say that was something we really looked forward to. But yeah, definitely some little bits of games and things here and there it mixed into the free time.
Absolutely. Can't write out the classic board games. Anything else you guys did in your free time?
We didn't have a lot of free time. I just want to mention we were trying to squeeze in some workouts. We had an exercise protocol. We were trying to squeeze in 3 15-minute workouts. It was part of a larger study that got wasn't funded. And then we ended up adapting it just to try and test out some of those operationally. How did that work in our schedule? And I think we found that it wasn't that great because, to prepare for a workout and then you get it. Actually, the smaller workouts didn't mean that we were like getting that sweaty, but it was hard to kind of shift your brain over. And a lot of us felt like it'd be good to get it all done with in one day, in one go, instead of having to remember to go back and do this other part of the workout. But we were testing out some portable fitness equipment. So that was something that we were kind of trying to squeeze in as we could as well.
Yes. So for all those fitness aficionados that are listening here, what were some of your exercises? I think I heard something about a band. Were you doing band exercises? What did that look like?
Yeah, so the bands that we were using, it was high fit and high gear, and basically they could be wrapped around like, a sturdy staircase pole, or, it's just something sturdy. And it was basically all basically all just resistance movements. So you could do, bicep curls, triceps, squats. You can pretty much adapt the equipment to do anything you'd like. However, I think the thing that we noticed the most was, first and foremost, what Ali was saying, fitting in multiple 15-minute workouts throughout the day wasn't really conducive to our schedule. By the time you get warmed up in your body and you're, actually doing an actual workout, it's already done the 15-20 minutes, and you're like, well, why did I just start doing this when I'm already ending it? And then you're changing in and out of your workout clothes and things like that. So from most of our point of view, the scheduling didn't really work out, but the actual use of the equipment, it did give a good workout, but it wasn't quite as compact as what we were hoping it was going to be. The whole idea of the resistance bands was so that you can attach it to any sturdy surface and do the workout within a small confined space. But in order to really get a good resistance based on different levels of strength, sometimes you would have to, one, adjust the bands, but two, walk out as far as you can from the bands to get the appropriate strength and resistance that you'd like. And so sometimes that took maybe double the amount of confined space that you were hoping for. And so so we found that there were different pros and cons to those resistance bands and workout plans.
I gotcha. Well, hey, whether you're on a Mars mission or, you're living your everyday life, it's always hard to fit in exercise. So I think I can resonate with that. But, something that I wanted to touch on, obviously you all work for the Aerospace Corporation, and this was a corporate sponsored mission. So how did this come to be? How did you get sponsorship from the Aerospace Corporation? How did you guys all get connected? How was your crew selected? Was the training process as a crew in preparing for this mission?
I can take this one. So it kind of got started with me and Kristine. We knew each other prior. We did actually the NASTAR suborbital scientist training together in 2011. So I had joined the Aerospace Corporation in about 2016. And I think Kristine had already been here for a number of years. So, we mentioned as a joke that, they should really fund us to go do this stuff. And, after a while, I learned about some of the corporate activities where they were sponsoring sabbaticals for, ideas that people had, and to really spark some innovation in the company. And so we decided to see if we could get sponsorship to just get some folks together that were experienced in human spaceflight or experienced in analog work. And so that's kind of how that started. And we were able to put out a survey to our human spaceflight community of interest to, figure out, would people seriously be interested in participating? And it was a small community. It's a little bit bigger now. So we didn't flood the whole company to find out who would want to come with us. But we considered this as like a demo and got a number of names of folks that were interested and what skill sets they had. And we got together and kind of planned out a selection process. It wasn't very formal, but we tried to find a number of people that were good and experienced in operations, or maybe had some greenhouse experience, or some of the other things that MDRS typically is looking for. And so we wanted to apply as a whole aerospace crew. And so I know that MDRS does allow for those corporate groups to come in as a group application instead of the individual roles. And so we kind of worked to align ourselves to what we thought MDRS was looking for in terms of a well-rounded mission. And then we wanted to plan out, typically for field work and analog tests, you have some big objective that you're trying to satisfy. But in this case, we had the opportunity in front of us and wanted to showcase that we could, coordinate and do the logistics and get everybody ready and do some valuable things. So we came up with the objectives that we just talked about, some of them that we wanted to do. So that's kind of how it got started. And then we were able to get some sponsorship with a corporate strategic initiative under the Human Spaceflight subdivision. So did I miss anything there, Kristine?
No, I think she covered it. I think one of the really cool parts about us developing this as a demonstration type mission was really to show that aerospace has all the components to be able to do this. Like, we've got people that can do all the different roles. We've got people that can serve as primary investigators, people that can serve as the mission planners and developers, and also crew members. So I think it was good to be able to prove what we already thought we knew, which was that we would have all those pieces. And it turns out we.
You did. What was the training like beforehand? I imagine, if you all work for the same company, maybe the communication might be a little bit easier than if you're strangers and you're only, communicating via email. But what was your training like? Did you have regular meetings in those trainings? What were you guys preparing for? What were you discussing as a crew? Were, you assigning roles or talking operational? I'd be curious to hear about kind of how that preparation went.
So I'll take this one too. We were a little bit delayed during the pandemic. So initially, I'll just add too that Kristine was like kind of our default commander, because MDRS likes the mission commanders to have some prior analog experience. And so then I kind of took over as for the crew executive officer role and just kind of the project managers on the aerospace side to try and, get the funding, corral all the people together. We set up initially, I think it was like monthly meetings just to kind of get everybody together and aligned. And then we went through a little bit of a lull period. And then I think when they confirmed us in March of 2022, we really started to outline our plan, counting down to the mission. We had weekly, quick weekly tags. And I think, and I guess during our actual meetings, we planned a September 2022 get together in our corporate headquarters in El Segundo for us to spend a few days together. Some of us hadn't met in person. Actually, Kristine and Ashley and I all knew each other, but we hadn't really spent a lot of time with the other crew members. And so we did some crew bonding. We went to an escape room. So that was a really, really fun activity. And we tried to hit like some of the corporate things that we needed to check off our list and really just prepare ourselves through checklists and making sure that we understood, what we need to be prepared for the objectives that we had. Yeah.
All the, mission critical information, all the things that you need to be prepared for, once you're actually there. Speaking of that, mission and preparing for the MDRS, several MDRS alumni have actually made it to space, including Dr. Jessica Watkins and Dr. Simon Proctor. Do you feel like your involvement in the MDRS program has helped better prepare you for a career in space?
I can answer that one. Yeah, just based on a couple of different analog experiences, both as a crew member and as a mission support type person, and also working as a flight controller, I would say all of those experiences provide sort of pieces to that puzzle of, if I were to be that person, if I were to be in space and I was to be an astronaut, what would I want to be like? Or what would my goals be of how I would shape myself? And so from the perspective of the ground-based mission control person, plus the crew member being in an analog environment, you learn a lot about yourself and about what traits and things you think would be best to model after if you really end up being in that position. So I think a lot of that is kind of the soul searching part. But additionally, too, the fundamental skills and experience is unmatched. There's not much you can do on Earth that would really be better than doing a bunch of analogs before going to space. So that's all of that technical expertise and hands-on experience and actually wearing a spacesuit and all of that is very, very important too. But I think part that maybe people don't think about a lot is learning a lot about yourself is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And working with others, working as a team in a stressful, confined space, you probably are learning a lot of, like you said, about yourself, but how you work with others as well. Ashley and Allie, do you have anything to add to that?
I mean, this is, MDRS is obviously my second, or not obviously, but it is my second analog that I've done. And, I would just have to echo what Kristine is saying, because, when you approach people in different situations, particularly in an isolated and confined environment, then what you realize is, even if you can't necessarily change how the other person views the situation. You can only change how you view the situation and how you approach a problem and how you approach a different person and how, how to, go about a stressful situation. And so you can only focus on your reaction to those situations. And I think, as Kristine was saying, people really overlook the fact that, psychological and social and emotional and mental factors really play a large role in future long duration human spaceflight. And I think these isolated and confined environments that you see in various analogs, whether, it's an analog like we did in Utah, or if it's more of like a hermetically sealed facility like Sirius 21, or if it's underwater like Nemo. In all of those environments, you're still undergoing the same psychological, emotional, social, mental, cognitive issues, and it really helps a person to understand how you would react to those situations. You don't know how you react in those situations until you're actually put in that. And so I think doing analogs really does help prepare people to understand themselves more and know how they're going to react in future long duration spaceflight. So I would say doing an analog is very critical to knowing how you'll react if you go into space as an astronaut in the future. So.
Yeah. Ashley, you alluded, and that's a great segue to one of my next points I wanted to discuss. Ashley, I know that you completed an 8-month mission in Moscow called Sirius 21, which was designed to help NASA and researchers from around the world learn about behavioral and psychological effects of isolation and confinement. So what were some of the results of that study? And I'd also be curious to know what were some of the similarities and differences between the two missions?
Yeah, so unfortunately, since we just finished the mission this past July, researchers are still analyzing all of the results, and they still have a few years to really publish anything officially. So I don't know direct results of our data yet. But I can say that we had a really wide variety of experiments I think we were running about 70 different experiments during that isolation mission. Some of them were psychological, a lot of surveys, a lot of how did you feel in this situation? There were some situations where they induced external stressors on us to see how we reacted. A lot of cognitive studies, a lot of virtual reality studies, some using virtual reality to help us feel more at home. Some were virtual realities to do docking simulations, to see how our piloting skills were either maintained or degraded throughout the 8 months in isolation. We did EVAs, simulated EVAs, extravehicular activities to the lunar surface using virtual reality as well, a combination of virtual reality and a body unloading system. So, in addition to those, we had, digestive and immunological studies. We had, a lot of physical studies where, we're running on a treadmill and doing a cognitive test simultaneously. And so, we had a wide variety of studies in there, and I do look forward to, I really truly thank all the researchers and scientific investigators that had studies in this international project, because I am personally looking forward to those results. But while we don't have the results, I can say, I can talk to your question of how those two analogs differed a bit, in that, so of course, an 8-month mission, for an 8-month mission, you're really focusing a little bit more on the psychological and mental and emotional factors that isolation and confinement induces on a human body. Whereas for MDRS, because we had such a facility in such a very unique, wonderful, extreme environment in Hanksville, Utah, the MDRS analog is really focused more on operational field test factors, I would say, where we're testing out, testing out our experiments in this extreme environment, and then seeing, okay, what went right, what went wrong with the procedures. Could we potentially mitigate errors in the future with these types of experiments? Could we increase the technological readiness level of these experiments? Did we fulfill all of the goals that the PIs, the principal investigators, put out for us? And if not, what caused us to not do that? And of course, when you're in the field, we have our mock-up spacesuits on. We're doing things with bulky gloves and everything like that. And so it's a little bit more realistic with actual field testing of experiments. Whereas for Series 21, we weren't really doing field tests. It was really all experiments on our own body. So, we'd be putting electrodes on our own body. We'd be putting, VO2 masks on us and doing experiments. We'd be doing EEGs. And it was all trying to see how our specific bodies were reacting to the isolated and confined environment. So in short, one is a little bit more operational and field test oriented from my point of view. And the other, the Series 21 8-month mission, is more psychological, emotional, cognitive factor oriented.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear the differences between the two missions. That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, just right off the bat, 8 months versus 2 weeks, obviously going to have a much different experience. Kristine, I know that you also did another analog mission. Can you tell me about the Mars Society's Flashline Mars Arctic Research Station mission?
Yeah, I spent a month-long mission to the FMARS facility in 2009, and I was the interdisciplinary scientist for that. So that was, obviously that was more than a decade ago. However, I would say in the facility that itself, the FMARS and the MDRS have a lot of similarities just with the habitat, since they were designed to be very similar. So same shape, same layout, pretty much. MDRS, however, has since received a lot of additions and upgrades and add-ons. So there's a lot more quote unquote pressurized volume available to the crew at MDRS than there was at FMARS. So there's a lot more places you can, get away from each other if you need to, or a lot more space to do your science or do a video in private if you need to, or something like that. Whereas FMARS really just was the one habitat. Just logistically, obviously a lot harder to get to FMARS, but than MDRS. But and then just the biggest difference to me once in simulation on the mission was just the availability and the presence of support. At FMARS, we were pretty much on our own. We had a tiered mission support system, but it was all through the computer. We could message and send our communication delayed messages to Earth and get some response from mission support. But it was really focused on, hey, the rover's not working and we need to troubleshoot something. Can you send us the manual or that sort of thing? It wasn't as much helping with planning or approving our EVAs or sending our reports and things like we did at MDRS. So I'd say that the closeness to Earth, quote unquote, at FMARS seemed to be more separated. Whereas at MDRS, you have the on-site mission support staff that are there and are communicating with you every day, at least through the comm window at minimum, and you have that regular sort of the same people too as well. So it's you feel a little bit more connected to the support than you did at FMARS, where we kind of felt like we were out there on our own. But yeah, no, I appreciated being able to see the similarities, because I don't know how many crew members have actually been to both. So I know there haven't been that many crews to FMARS simply because it's so expensive and difficult to get to, but very neat seeing and comparing both.
Yeah, you're one of a few, and that's an incredible experience. Well, you hit on something I was curious about, which was the communication. I know that in an MDRS mission, the crew was put under almost all the same constraints that a crew on Mars would experience, including a delay in communication with Earth. So what was your communication like with both mission control and your family? Did you get a chance to talk to them? Probably no FaceTiming, but maybe some text messages or emails. What was that like?
Yeah, so we had, obviously we didn't have real-time communication. We did use what ended up being a very neat experiment. It started out being just kind of an idea for us for communications, but ended up becoming its own experiment in its own right. Our crew member, Barbara, her high school aged son came up with a plan for us using the Discord app. It's a app that a lot of gamers use to communicate, to create a channel on Discord that had some sub channels that each crew member could communicate privately, with the family and friends. But then we also had a crew channel where we could talk, to text each other in real time. And also we had technical channels where we could talk to our corporate communications, people at Aerospace, primary investigators at Aerospace, and it had the time delay baked in. So through that app, we could basically text, and then it baked in that time delay so that then they wouldn't receive the message for a certain number of minutes, and then we would get the replies back. And I think I have to ask Barbara the total number, but I mean, it was something on the order of several thousand messages that were sent back and forth over that throughout our mission, both personal things as well as professional things. It was really cool, and I hope that it continues to be used in our future missions, because it was really good for us.
Yeah, maybe they can make that a staple for future missions using that same Discord. Did you feel like you still had that connection, or, I'm sure at some level, of course, you're going to miss, your children, your family, your friends, and, obviously craving that communication with them. But did you feel like you still had that sense of connection with Earth, mission control, or your family, or you were so busy with your projects, they're like, hey, I don't need to communicate with them. I'm focused on my projects that, hey, I'll talk to you in 2 weeks when I get back.
I mean, my crew channel with family and friends was pretty busy. So I felt very well connected. A lot of people were sending me messages and things throughout the mission. So I felt well connected throughout the mission. And generally, I mean, sending emails and whatnot was also allowed, so we could, as long as it was with appropriate delay. So I think I felt, again, it's a short period of time, right, that you're in simulation at MDRS. So it's not as hard to get through. But I know Allie you should talk to that. She's the only one here that has children.
Yeah, I have 3 kids. Usually if I'm on business travel, which is usually about 1 week at a time. So I knew for 2 weeks they were not going to like me very much, and that I couldn't FaceTime. So yeah, usually we can FaceTime usually once a night. I did feel connected. Like I had my husband in a private chat. So beyond the time delay, it was just like if I wanted to tell him about something, it was just like normal texting. And actually, yeah, it was really helpful. And then he would send me like an email with a video of my kids saying good night or something. So I got a couple of those. I missed a concert at my kids' school, so we got video of that. And these things happen. So
yeah. What about you, Ashley? How was the communication?
Yeah, for me, within MDRS, I think our Discord channels felt almost like real time for me. Again, I'm comparing it to what we had in Series 21, and in Sirius we had 2 30-minute sessions per day where our letters, basically written Word documents or an audio file, could be sent to and from an approved list of friends and family who we provided the addresses for earlier on prior to the mission. And so, if my letter went out to somebody on Monday morning during the morning 30-minute session, it's possible I didn't get a reply back, for several days or weeks even. And so that was with family and friends. But even with our mission control down on the ground, we really only had morning and evening daily planning conferences with them. And other than that, we were not really given much immediate response time with them. Throughout the day, there were certain seances that, we'd call them seances, where maybe that's a Russian word, I'm not sure. But it was in Moscow, so that's what they called it. And basically the responses with mission control were not as immediate as they were with MDRS. So I think compared to what I saw in Series 21 and the delays that we had there versus what we had in MDRS was just, several minute delays. MDRS felt practically immediate. So I didn't feel very disconnected from friends and family and work back home. So.
Understood. That's good. So anybody that's thinking about, applying, applications are open. If you want to go to the MDRS, just know you can still communicate with your friends and family. You're not shut off from them completely. So what was the time delay at MDRS? Was it 5, 10, 20 minutes?
So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Allie and Kristine, but I think we did 5 minutes delay one way, 5 minutes the other. So it was a 10-minute total. And we decided on that based on actual positioning of Mars to Earth during that time period that we were in MDRS. And I do also want to point out that the communication delay that we decided on, that was something that we decided on as a crew. It's not something that every crew in MDRS does. So it's really dependent on what you and your other crew members decide to do. Of course, I think, communication delays make the experience much more realistic, I think. But I think past crews, have decided against doing that. It's just dependent on who you go in with.
Yeah, that's so interesting that as a crew, you wanted to live is closely similar to what that experience would really be like. So yeah, I commend you for that. That's awesome. I know that we're coming up. We've got about 15 minutes left. I want to at least say it, but I see there are some questions already. But if you have any questions, please put those in the chat. We'll try to get those answered. I do have 2 questions for you while we're letting those audience questions come in. I know that there was a STEM component to this, something that your crew participated in during the mission. It was a STEM program for students. Can you tell me about that as well?
Yeah, we tried to set up a Discord channel for educators to engage with us during the mission. And I don't know if the messaging or if it was just too difficult, like logistically, to get everybody logged into the correct Discord server to chat with us. But I got one of my kids' classes to get in there. So we were able to take questions from them during the mission. And then we were able to have that class name our drone, for example.
Yeah.
And then we had scheduled to end our simulation a day early so that we could have a live event. And so with the help of the Aerospace Corporation, we had set up a live event. So we're broadcasting live from MDRS, and we had over 1,100 kids, I think, dialed in from classrooms all across the country. So we just kind of gave an overview and did a Q&A of our mission. We were all in our flight suits, and it was just really rewarding to do at the end of the mission, and just knowing that we were, touching that many people and that they were excited, or maybe they weren't so excited, but their class was there. So, yeah, it was really, really good. And I would recommend, if you could, do that, because it just kind of enriches the whole experience. And it's kind of, why a lot of us are in this field in the first place. And so just inspiring as many people as possible is really, really inspiring to, I think, what we do on a daily basis. So, yeah.
For sure. At some point, maybe, however many years from now, 10, 15, 20 years from now, somebody's going to be in a podcast and they're an astronaut, and they're going to say, I remember I watched that MDRS crew and I saw them in their flight suits talking about their mission, and that inspired me to go down this path to become an astronaut. So I think you're 100% right that experience does probably make, those 2 weeks away from your friends and your family and doing this research worth it. Just, get that interaction with those students and help inspire the next generation. So I applaud you for that. Let's see, I've got one other question, and I'll take them from the audience. One thing that I personally was curious about is, your experience being a woman in the space industry, which we know is male dominated. With it being Women's History Month, I would just be curious, as a woman in this industry, what are some of the hurdles or challenges you've had to face? And the second part of that are what are some of your proudest moments? I want to know what your triumphs are of working in the space industry. Allie?
First, I got the mom angle on this one because Barbara and I were the moms on the crew, and her kids are just a little bit older. Mine are all in elementary school this year, so it's a very exciting year. And I'm actually going tomorrow to the school as part of their career week. So I'm going to wear my flight suit and talk to 2 of the classes that my kids are in. So I'm geared up for that and excited. Yeah, it's been interesting. I think a lot of my experiences I reflect on in the moment. I'm not really realizing, oh, that's because I'm a woman. But like later on, I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that was happening. Like, yeah, I think women have a lot of the softer skills and end up people pleasing for whatever societal reasons that we do. And I definitely fall into that category and kind of take on a lot of maybe I'm not an admin, but I would like just jump in and do, work that I probably shouldn't even be doing. Whereas and stuff that you're talking about earlier with men that apply to those things that they're not super qualified for, and women will wait till they're 100%. I think that's totally valid. And then of course, just having, the whole having kids and having been through like returning to work after a maternity leave and taking maternity leaves, and just the pressure and, the thought about what is that going to do to my career long term. Everybody that becomes a parent kind of struggles with that, I think. And I think the thing is it doesn't really, and a lot of it makes you a stronger person. So it takes a lot to kind of get through that and realize that those experiences, even though they're not directly work related, do make you stronger. A lot of the whole like parenting, like those 3 dinosaurs coming at you. You gotta be ready for a lot, and you become a multitasker, and you can really handle a lot of stuff that's thrown at you. So I would say,
yeah. Thank you for that. I appreciate that perspective. Specifically being a mom, I think we can probably all say, hey, at some point we've done that same thing where we've stepped into a role that, hey, maybe wasn't really my role, but somebody had to fill it if it's, like you said, in kind of that administrative type of jobs. What about you, Ashley or Kristine? Have you had something similar? Any specific hurdles, and maybe, some of your wins as well?
I think my main thing was, when I was beginning in the industry, and even now sometimes, I still think I feel a little bit of imposter syndrome sometimes when I walk into meetings. I mean, right now I support the U.S. Space Force, and it's still to this day, as you said, very male dominated. And, you walk into a meeting and sometimes, it's a room full of, 20 men and you as the single female. And so, that can be intimidating, but, it's something that, I mean, obviously, like with the more experience, you get more and more confident. And I think the thing that I just have always, held as a key for me, as to help me succeed, was that I just always ask questions all the time. I'm not really afraid to go up to, whether it's a male or a female, counterpart that may know more than me, and I think that's what kind of helps you to be more confident, because you realize, if you have a dumb question in the room, or it's not a dumb question, actually, it's something that somebody else in the room is probably thinking of as well. So even though, I think I started off in the industry as, being a little bit uncertain about my skills, and, am I good enough? And, what am I doing in this, this room with high ranking, military and government folks? But you realize, at the end of the day, you are meant to be there, and you do know what you're talking about. And maybe you have a perspective that, other people that have been in the industry for, 15, 20, 25 plus years haven't thought about in a long time. And so, I won't say that I have experienced a specific example of a hurdle, but I think overcoming that initial imposter syndrome when I began in the industry was probably, something that a lot of other females probably go through.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been lucky to be surrounded by fantastic mentors here at Aerospace, whether they're male or female. And it's I would say just lean on those people, ask questions, don't be scared. It's okay to it's okay to be wrong. So I think those are the things that helped me overcome having that initial imposter syndrome.
Yeah, absolutely. I can relate to that. I think that resonates with all of us, that feeling of imposter syndrome, and walking into a room, and being the only female. I work in a technology job, and I see that every day. So yeah, that definitely resonates with me. Kristine, anything that you want to add to that one before we take some audience questions?
Yeah, I'll be quick. I was going to add 2 real quick things. One is, for me, they didn't pay me to say this, but I feel like the Aerospace Corporation environment, I think a lot of those hurdles have been removed or managed very well for us. And I compare this to, outside of work, I'm a volunteer firefighter. So comparing those two environments where one is advanced a lot further, aerospace, in being inclusive of everyone, but particularly in this case, women, and helping to proactively remove hurdles and bridge gaps and promote, promote diversity and provide extra resources and things like that. I think aerospace has done a good job. So I did want to say that. The other thing I wanted to say was something that I personally do is that, I have a personality, I'm talkative. People sometimes don't equate that type of personality with being technically the depth of technical expertise and knowledge that I have. And so I feel like sometimes I have to overprove my conclusion or my point in a presentation or a briefing or a report because of the perception that my personality doesn't necessarily equate with what people think of as a technical expert sometimes. So I wouldn't say that was a hurdle per se, but it's something I've learned about myself over the years, is that I'm not going to change my personality. I like to be friendly and outgoing, and I like to talk to people. I like to be myself, but I do understand that sometimes that comes with, hey, you better be ready to, to prove yourself extra. Because I'm not, I'm not fitting your typical image of what a technical expert's me looks like. So I have learned that over the years. That is all I was really going to add, those two things.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for sharing that. I think us having that conversation and being able to share some of those experiences just validates that we are all experiencing something similar, and we can support each other in that way. So yeah, thank you for being a little bit vulnerable and sharing those pieces, because sometimes that's difficult to deal with. But now we do have some audience questions, so I want to make sure that I get to those. So the first question, I think this is going to be directed to you, Kristine. Janine asks, given the long-term impact of radiation on eyes, especially cloudy cornea and retina damage, what is haptic navigation design and contingency exercises like? That may be...
Okay. Yeah, I don't have an excellent question, excellent answer to this. I will say that as a radiation physicist, I work with radiation effects on the human body in my day job. Most of what I work with are the stochastic effects, though, such as cancer, cardiovascular, and whatnot types of effects. I don't typically work with what are considered to be the deterministic effects, which eye damage tends to be if you get a radiation dose under a certain threshold, you don't tend to see those. So those is not my specialty. Ashley, I'm not sure. Did you do any navigation type with your virtual reality sims at Sirius? Because we didn't do this on our mission, so I don't have a really good answer for that.
Not really. No, I mean, we had one spatial navigation exercise, I think. It was part of another study, but it wasn't really a specific navigation study, so I can't really talk to that.
Yeah, I will say generally, though, in a big picture of this, the concept that many systems in the human body will degrade on the outbound mission to Mars, let's say, that is something that has to be considered across the board. You're talking bones, muscles, eyes, cognitive, everything that's going to be less capable at your arrival at Mars than when you launched from Earth. That is something that has to be considered and worked into all of the procedures and expectations of crew performance throughout the mission. So that is a hot topic.
Yeah. Great question, Janine. Another question, Ronnie asks, does anyone ever lose their cool? I'm assuming that he's referring to in the mission.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's natural for any group of adults that are living in a small space to have, some disagreements. But probably I would say maybe the pro of that is that, you are kind of required to be more direct in confronting those matters pretty much immediately. So, being passive aggressive in these kinds of environments really doesn't work. You really do address any types of situations where you might have a disagreement or, different opinions about things in a more direct manner. And, things get fleshed out pretty fast, I would say, to just kind of nip it in the bud. So you don't want something like that lingering. You really want to have a cohesive crew. That's really important. Team dynamics is probably one of the most important things to have in a mission. And so, sure, There are disagreements and differences of opinions, but you really, I think, address them very fast, and we did deal with that, I think, in our mission as well.
Yeah, for sure. Disagreements, that's inevitable. You're in like you said, a small confined space, but yeah, address those issues quickly. Another question is from Chris. Chris said, how did you and your team gather sponsorships and funding to be able to attend your MDRS mission?
So we kind of put a proposal together internally to Aerospace, like I had mentioned, to that internal sabbatical program that we had through our iLab innovation laboratory. And we were able to secure funding for a short period of time to go off and kind of bake the idea and put together the application for MDRS. And then we kind of sent that in as a proposal to our human spaceflight subdivision to get the sponsorship, to have the corporate sponsored crew.
There we go. I know that there's a few others, and we're at time here, so we're not able to get to all of those, but want to say a huge thank you, Kristine, Allie, Ashley. Thank you so much for participating in today's conversation. This was really helpful. I'm excited for the possibility, of participating in an MDRS mission at some point. So thank you so much. I appreciate your time, your perspectives. This was really a great conversation. And I do want to add, we are doing a drawing for a free signed copy of Dr. Robert Zubrin's new book, Case for Mars. My producer here has selected a name, and the winner of the autographed book is Paulo Roberto Ajuro. I apologize if I butchered your name there. But Paulo, if you could please send us your email. That way we can communicate with you and get you that book. All right. There we go. Again, thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time. Leah, thank you so much. James, our executive director, thank you. Michael, thank you. Michael Stoltz. We did it, people. Thank you, everybody, so much for attending today. Appreciate all your questions. Bye, everybody.
Bye, thank you.